In this slide, the upper illustration shows a lateral view of the palate and indicates the area in this particular patient where the posterior palatal seal could be placed. In the lower left illustration, the areas of glandular tissue are pointed out in a frontal view. In the picture to the lower right, the yellow line represents the area where the posterior palatal seal would be placed in this particular patient. Notice how in the glandular area, the palatal seal is wider than at the midline. This is because at the midline, the posterior nasal spine is present, and this could pose a problem because the palatal seal would have to be very thin over this area. This slide shows the area of the vibrating line being marked with an indelible transfer stick. If the posterior palatal seal extended beyond this area, the denture would be dislodged by the muscles of the soft palate as they come under function as they would during swallowing or speaking. To determine this location, the patient is asked to say ah, ah, ah several times, and the most anterior point where movement is noticed is marked as the palate moves up and down. In the lab exercise, mark points on the maxillary cast in the fovea palatina area and the hamular notch areas. Connect these points with a solid line which will appear as a gentle curve toward the anterior. This line will extend into the buccal vestibular areas of the hamular notch. Place points in the glandular area 5 to 8 millimeters forward of this first line and about 2 millimeters anterior to this line in the mid-palatal area. Draw a second line anterior to the first line that connects these dots and forms a butterfly pattern. It looks like two mountains with a valley in between. Make a depth cut on the posterior line with a cleoid discoid or the point of a green-handled knife. It should be about a ½ millimeter deep in the middle of the posterior palate, 1 millimeter deep in the hamular notch area, and about 1½ millimeters deep in the glandular area between the hamular notch and the middle of the posterior palate. The green-handled knife with its rounded backside of the blade is a very good instrument for carving in the posterior palatal seal because it will allow you to feather out the anterior portion of the seal to zero and blend it in with the rest of the palate of the cast. The palatal seal should never extend onto the maxillary tuberosities or onto a torus. It should feather out to zero at the anterior line. It should not extend onto the maxillary tuberosities or onto a torus, as these areas are not depressible and would prevent the denture from seating entirely. This illustration shows the various depths and the positions of the components of the posterior palatal seal.